Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daryl Urbanski, your host, as always. And today we are joined by Yoni Stern, a renowned innovation inside the box specialist and SVP business development at SIT Limited, Systematic Inventive Thinking. With over 23 years at SIT, Yoni has led transformative projects globally, working with giants like Disney, Intel, and Nestle. As a keynote speaker and Ivy League faculty member, he shares his passion for pragmatic, innovative thinking. Yoni's expertise in the SIT method, a structured approach to innovation, has redefined problem solving for numerous organizations. He's also an accomplished author and respected faculty at Columbia Business School. I've asked Yoni to join us here today to share his story and delve into systematic inventive thinking so we can all do better to think differently and achieve breakthroughs in our field. So Yoni, thanks so much for joining us, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks, Daryl, for inviting me here.
Yeah, it's an honor and a pleasure. Enjoyed talking to you so far. He puts up with my ranting and my sidebars, but it's worthwhile we got here. Now, before we hop into the method and your experience and insights you have from the past, present, and into the future, how did you even get going into this? I always like to ask, like, you come from a family of innovators and inventors and entrepreneurs? Is this like family table dinner talk that became a career or what?
Absolutely not. My dad's a lawyer. It's not really that innovative in those aspects, but no, I was actually really interested in psychology when I was growing up. And so I studied my bachelor's degree in psychology and my master's degree in social industrial organizational psychology. I was much more interested in how people think rather than what's normally considered, what at the time was considered abnormal psychology or clinical psychology. But how do mainstream people actually think? How do they process information? How do they come up with new ideas? And how can they do things better? How can we help them do things better? And what I was really focusing on in my master's thesis was the idea of persuasion. How can we have stronger messaging, and how can we get people to really think the way that we want them to think about topics? When I was looking for an internship as part of my master's degree, I was exploring with advertising agencies who are really strong into persuasion, as you can imagine. And I was looking to do an internship there, hopefully become part of the strategic teams in helping to craft messages and developing the right ways to communicate them. And as I was looking for that internship, I was interviewing with various ad agencies. And inside one of the agencies in Israel, I found that there was a small consulting firm, only 6 people. And one of the things that they did was to help ad agencies become more creative. And typically we think that the advertising industry in general, they have a creative department. So we think that the creatives are naturally creative. So that really piqued my curiosity of how can you make creative people more creative, but how does that actually work? And so I started not only interviewing with the ad agency, but I also interviewed with this consultancy called SIT. And in the end, I was offered positions by both of them, and I decided to work with SIT. And so I consulted the agency in how to make their campaigns more effective and creative. And that was really cool.
That sounds really
that's
cool.
How I got started. That's how I fell into this job. I didn't even know that this type of thing existed.
So that's so interesting start. So did you say you ended up consulting the company you were applying for?
Yes, that's exactly right.
I'm sorry, you want to hire me? I'm unavailable right now, but you can pay my consulting fee. Ooh, that's a feel-good moment right there. I love that. What was it like then? You get onboarded. You went from applying for a job to consulting them. Did you feel any sense of imposter syndrome, or walk me through? Obviously, there was probably some challenges in the early days.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting. First of all, my first job at SAT was really my dream job. It was sitting and watching TV all day.
Oh.
And yeah, what we were doing is we were studying the creativity of advertising campaigns and seeing what's in common between those that won awards for creativity and effectiveness versus those that don't. And are there patterns that underlie those campaigns that are more effective and more creative in their communications? And so my job was actually to watch films of the winners of advertising campaigns for creativity. And that was lots of fun. If you think about watching the Super Bowl commercials nonstop all the time, the best commercials that are out there, and just enjoying them and categorizing them. So once I was able to do that, I started to apply those tools, those templates of advertising, which I'd been formalized by systematic inventive thinking. And that's how this all came together. SIT was formalizing those underlying patterns of creativity in advertising. And then I would go and work on the briefs that the ad agency had in order to apply this approach, this methodology, and build the DNA of creativity into their advertising campaigns. Of course, yes, obviously there were several challenges along the way, especially infiltrating the creative department and saying, okay, I can help make you more creative. But it was really quite a supportive atmosphere because SIT was the subsidiary of the ad agency. So they really respected the work that was being done, the research that was being done, and they even appreciated being the guinea pigs of those who would apply this methodology in real life to real campaigns first. And they embraced that opportunity. Yeah, I was about 20, 30 years younger than the people I was working with, which was quite a challenge, but it was fun and they were really nice people and I enjoyed every minute and they listened to me and we really worked as a team. We were collaborative. It wasn't like a consultant who tells you what to do. It was a consultant who was part of your team and working together with you, respecting your knowledge and your experience and bringing in whatever I had to contribute from, not from my life experience, but from this approach, from this methodology.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. I feel that people do their best work when they're in the zone, and to be in the zone, you can't be holding fear and animosity, and there's friendly competition that I think is helpful, but not it's yin yang. There's friendly competition and unfriendly competition. And I've noticed, what was it? There's a book called The Secret of Making Money or something like that. It's talking about the world is made out of like a vegetable type substance that when you think a lot, it forms into stuff. But yeah, what is that? I'm old school. This is like old school this is Every Man a Winner from 1920. It was or maybe even before 1916. It's the predecessor to Think and Grow Rich. Charles, or something like that. Anyways, but it's the same concept that his point in that book was you have to use the creative juices, the creative force to bring things into the world. I'm not trying to get all woo-woo manifestation on you, but just when you're scarcity, you tend to tighten up and fearful and you can't see the options. But when you're a child, you're creative and you play, life unfolds smoother. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think, yeah, it's interesting they talk about scarcity because scarcity is one of the main principles of how to get people persuaded to do what you're looking for. Cialdini is one of the gurus in the world. Yeah, in the world of persuasion. And scarcity is one of those properties that's really important. And so scarcity actually plays a very important role in innovation. Once you come up with a creative idea and you help to think of innovative solutions, how do you sell that idea in? How do you get people to buy into it? Creating a sense of scarcity really oftentimes creates a sense of urgency of that I should actually be doing something with it and not just thinking about creative ideas, which is oftentimes the downfall.
Action. It gets the action. Yeah. For people that don't know, let's go through Robert Cialdini's 6. Scarcity, reciprocity, likability, commitment, consistency, authority, and social proof. Right? Is that the 6?
Right. Did I get wow, you got it.
Yeah. And that book was Every Man a Winner by Charles Edward Hopplestone. That was copyright. What is the copyright on this thing? Copyright it's way back in the day. I swear it's 1912 or something. Sorry, 1936. There you go. That was the predecessor to Think and Grow Rich. Yeah, no, persuasion is, I think, one thing because you're trying to, what is it? They've done things that Cialdini talks about in his book that you can take a chicken, like a mother hen, and you can put a stuffed chicken in there and with a recording device in it that makes it sound like a chick. And it'll just treat it like a real baby and assume it's one of its. And it's because it's like a hack through the brain and you can trigger it to accept this thing as its own. And people have that too. He noticed that when people are trying to did an experiment, so commitment and consistency is that if somebody's cutting, and we all tend to think most people are generally good people. So if we're waiting in line for a photocopier and someone's trying to butt ahead of us and they say, excuse me, they notice that if they did not give a reason, it was like 80% of people are like, no, screw you, go to the back of the line. But if the person just said, because, excuse me, can I cut ahead? Because it didn't matter what came after that. They assume that this person looks like a good person, commitment, consistency. I'm going to assume that they have a valid reason. I don't understand. And ahead you go. And so it was the opposite.
Yeah.
These are, like you mentioned, persuasive hacks. Are there, since you brought it up, are there other ones that you like that aren't maybe as well known, but are very effective? Like Cialdini's 6?
One of the things that I really like was based on a master's thesis. It's called the elaboration likelihood model. And there are different ways to persuade people depending on what are the chances that they're going to elaborate on your messages. For example, if you're trying to make a decision that requires a lot of investment, people are going to listen to more logical arguments because they'll process the information, they'll try to make rational decisions around, let's say, buying a home or buying a car or something that requires a lot of investment. But when it's a knee-jerk reaction, when it's something that they don't have to invest a lot in, then you use more emotional types of messages, and they don't really process it logically, they process it emotionally. So a lot of the consumer goods, durable consumer goods, use more emotional messages. You'll feel like this will play on your ego. And I find that's also really helpful depending on what types of communications. If you think about who you're communicating to and what the impact of what you're saying is supposed to make, it also helps guide what type of messaging that you're making.
I think that's really important. Most people are terrible decision makers. I'm probably more horrible than I want to admit. I probably have a frequency bias where I'm with myself all day, so I think I'm great. But if I align myself up with 1,000 other people, I may not have the best decision-making process. Who knows? But so part of that is this as well, helping guide people through, right? I think it's the old school
Exactly.
spin selling, situation, problem, implication, needs. So you really have to spend a lot of time helping people describe their situation and identify the problems. You don't need to spend a ton of time on the problems, but you do need to spend a lot of time on the implication of those problems because they may have not thought it through. It could be someone's got a toothache, we're like, whatever. And it's, hey, but what happens if you wake up tomorrow and it's terrible? What if you wake up tomorrow and it's 10 times as bad as it is now? And it's a holiday this weekend. And do you sure you want to wait that long? And like things like that can help push someone to take action now, I think is a good. For some people that maybe are struggling or starting out, where would you recommend they get going? Everybody's trying to sell their stuff. We're post-COVID. Small medium-sized businesses have been decimated. A lot of people are trying to get back out and grow their businesses. There may or may not be the wind at their back, so to speak, economically speaking. What would you recommend to someone starting out or struggling that's trying to advertise, trying to get their message out there and persuade people?
I think first of all, they have to understand very intimately what it is, what their benefit is, and to whom. So they first have to really identify who their target is and who they're talking to. One of the main mistakes that people make are they think that they're talking to groups of people, but they really have to talk about to a person. Personas are oftentimes helpful, but sometimes they also blur the fact that you're actually speaking to somebody. So you really want to imagine a specific person who fits that profile that you think will really benefit from what you're offering, and speak to that person. Have an imaginary conversation in your mind and think about what's going to work and what's going to convince them that you really have something valuable. And you mentioned spin selling because the spin is the acronym, but there's also the spin selling, which really isn't so great, because you try to convince people to use things that aren't very valuable to them, that won't be really helpful for them. And that's manipulating people is never good. So that's the other piece of advice.
Right.
Make sure that you really are providing value to the person, because even if you get that first sell and the person realizes that they've been cheated afterwards, that's going to do a lot more damage to you than not getting that sell.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. In today's day and age, the world is so transparent. I always say, even if you don't have an ethical bone in your body, even if deep down you're sinister, if you are trying to be in business long term, the only way to act is with love. It's great because you have to love on your customers, you have to love on your staff, you have to love on your vendors, you have to love on yourself. You have to be accepting of that. And that's where it behooves you to create systems and processes. It behooves you to make the best product. Markets are ultimately unknown and unknowable. If I asked you how many people are shopping for a car today, you would be able to look at leading indicators or lagging indicators like keyword searches, but ultimately we don't know, and it fluctuates constantly. So it's unknown and unknowable, but everyone can acknowledge and recognize excellence. So if you're clear on who you are helping and why, and you obsess about being the most excellent at that, you still need to market and sell, but it'll make your job so much easier. I actually heard Alex Harmozy said this really well. He said he spent a year and a half writing his book, like a year and a half, $100 million offers, great book, love it. So he spent a year and a half working on this book, like 4 hours a day, writing this book. And then he launched it with a single Facebook post. And since then, it's constantly grown in sales. and it's been with almost no promotion. But if you slap something together that's garbage, then it's the opposite. You have to work harder and harder to market and sell it against the tsunami of bad press, bad reviews that you have to outwork and overwork, because the people that you're delivering to aren't wowed and satisfied when you give it to them. So it really is the foundational thing of all of this. And I think I'm so glad that you brought that up, because a lot of people focus on making the money, and I like money. I don't want as much money as other people do. Sorry, I'm on a soapbox right now. I'm going to shut up in 10 seconds. My view is business is about helping people. My teeth hurt. I'm
exactly
bored.
right.
I'm hungry. Therefore, I'm going to trade with you to fix my problem. So if you don't know what problem you solve, and if you don't solve it, it's not going to go well for you, right? Better off to do it for free and get the experience and go, look, we're going to spend 6 months just collecting success stories just to be really good at what we do and go down that path, than to just fight the up. There was something, I said I was going to shut up, but I didn't. There was something called the Oprah effect. I don't know. Have you heard of this? The Oprah effect? When Oprah had her talk show in the day, they called it the Oprah effect. And they actually had a team that would audit businesses before they could be mentioned or featured on Oprah, because it would bury businesses. If she came on the show and was like, oh, I'm eating this croissant. It's this little bakery and I love it. I stop there every morning on the way. They would get flooded with 50,000 orders. And people don't care. They don't care that you have a small 3-person operation. They would just stack negative reviews. My croissant wasn't cooked properly. I had to wait 4 hours. Blah, 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 blah. Everyone's, I wish that the world could just see how great I am. No, people so they called it the Oprah effect, that it could explode your business or it could crush your business. They would have to audit you in advance to make sure you could do it at scale and handle it and bring quality. Otherwise, she could run you into bankruptcy, which is crazy, right? So
there is such a thing as bad press.
Right. Yeah. 100%. 100%. I think that's a really good point. Like, you might be, as the crypto guy that did the Ponzi scheme and donated to all those politicians. If you feel like you have an immortal soul, or we achieve immortality, whatever you believe, we have an AI singularity event. We upload our brains. Okay. Or you believe in a God or an afterlife, whatever you believe, reincarnation, there's some element of immortality. On an immortal's timeline, what would be the trophies you would put on your mantelpiece? Would it be the time that you ripped everyone off just to make a couple of bucks? Is that really what you would value as an immortal? Would you be like, yeah, I just don't think so. So
of course not. Yeah.
And
and how did I create value for people? Whatever type of value that is definitely way up there on the list of things that you would be proud of immortally. Yeah. The lives you positively impacted because of the work that you've done.
Yes, 100%. So speaking of that, what specific skills or behaviors you believe are important for your clients to improve or develop?
So I think that, first of all, that's the importance of realizing that you have to create new value all the time. You can't just rest on your laurels of what you've done in the past. So it's very important to come to that realization that you need to do something differently. The next thing is to realize that people can create new value and should be creating new value and not just relying on what other people have done before them. A lot of times we find that businesses are trying to benchmark what their competitors are doing, even their most successful competitors are doing, then copy that and hoping for the best. And sometimes it leads to successes, and oftentimes it doesn't lead to successes because you're different. There are different cultures, there are different organizations. But I think that organizations need to really realize that they have to embrace what they have, their advantages, their resources, and find their unique ways of leveraging them and creating value out of them. If they realize that they have uniquenesses, and that although they might not be number one in the market, sometimes they are, but maybe they're not number one in the market, it doesn't mean that they're not number one in some areas, and that they should be able to leverage those, whether it's talent of the organization, tangible resources, processes that they have in-house, whatever traditions, personalities, charisma, whatever that is, they should be able to learn how to properly leverage those in order to continue to grow.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know if this is a trick question or not, but how would you recommend they try to grow?
I don't know what you consider a trick question, but as you mentioned earlier, you called me an inside the box specialist, and that's exactly what systematic inventive thinking is all about. It's all about understanding what's in your box, what are your existing systems, what are your existing resources, and finding those non-intuitive ways that just sitting around and thinking the same way that you have all the time about the resources that you've been fortunate enough to collect over the years, just thinking about them in the same way isn't going to lead you to any growth. And
Right.
so the ability to start from your resources and understand how they could evolve and how they could emerge and how they can help you grow is really an important area.
Yeah.
So that's really what we do as an organization. We help you organically grow. We help you figure out how you can utilize your resources in smarter ways, not because you weren't smart enough until now in order to utilize them properly. You
Right.
were extremely efficient and effective in utilizing them for the purposes that they were there for.
Right.
But things change, and sometimes you just need to evolve together with them.
Right.
And oftentimes you're fixed in your preconceptions of how you've used those resources all along. And in
Right.
order to
Right.
grow, you don't have to just throw out everything and bring in new technologies and new resources and new talent. You just have to figure out how to reuse and rethink what you already have in place. And that's not an easier job, but it's a much more rewarding and
Yeah.
efficient and
Yeah.
much smarter
Acres of diamonds.
way of doing business. Yeah.
Acres of diamonds. If people don't know the Acres of Diamonds story, it's the short one. This guy grows up on his family's farm, and as a child, he dreams every night about finding a diamond mine and getting rich. When his parents pass away and he inherits the farm, he sells it right away and takes the money to search the planet and find this diamond mine that he's been dreaming of his whole life. And then years later, he ends up back in his hometown. He's broke and desolate. He didn't find it. And he's having breakfast at like the local diner or whatever. And he reads the morning paper, and the people he sold his parents' farm to found diamonds under the dirt, under the soil. So the moral of the story is you don't know what you got. It's what you're looking for is in your backyard. So I'm putting you on the spot here. Is there a 2-minute hack, a framework, something someone can use just as a simple exercise, just as an example for that sort of process? Make a list of, make a list of assets that you have, whether it's a customer list or machinery or something like that, and put them on playing cards and flip 3 cards and see what you can do. I'm just making this up, but
yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point, because that's what makes it systematic inventive thinking, because that's exactly the hack. It's a very structured process for coming up with new solutions. And many organizations out there have an innovation process built in. But as one of our clients at Johnson always said, that the front end always said, put idea here. So you start with, I don't know where the idea is going to come, but there'll be an idea, and then I have a well-structured process. But where do I get that idea from? Where do I get the idea? And that's one of the uniquenesses of this approach of systematic inventive thinking. It helps you exactly do what you're saying. If you're thinking inside the box, it means you're very familiar with your resources. So let's say you want to innovate one of your products. So you take the list of components of that product and you create an inventory of what you have in there. And that's the first step. We call that the closed world. What's in your closed world? What's there that you have access to? Now, one of the main principles of effective innovation, according to SAT, is that successful innovations utilize the closed world resources in new and surprising ways. But what are those new and surprising ways? Is it new to who? What is it surprising to who? So those new and surprising ways are a set of templates, which we've converted into tools, very structured tools that help you break through the way you usually perceive those resources or that system, and allows you to come up with a new idea. So one of them, for example, is called subtraction. Think about your system without the most essential component, the component that you felt the system couldn't exist without. So let's take, I don't know, an example of Schwinn's back in the 1920s, who say our business is all about transportation. We have bicycles. We're the #1 in bicycles. And then one of their employees walking into the office of the executive manager says, I have an excellent idea for our next generation bike. It's going to be a bike that has no wheels whatsoever, and you won't be able to go anywhere when you're riding it. And I see from your smile, think about it. It's ridiculous. Who would even imagine you're in the business of making bikes for people to get from place to place, and now you're going to have a bike without wheels? But as you're nodding, you realize that opens up the entire possibility of the exercise bike, of creating an entire industry of, the stationary bikes, exactly. So all of a sudden you see that there's new value that you've overlooked because you've defined your business in a certain way. And so just by subtracting one of those components, which is one of those tools that's very systematic, that helps you imagine how your system can evolve, it really helps you out. And the other insight that maybe you're realizing from this process is that you talked earlier about really understanding people's needs beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that this process does is it allows you to not have to understand or start from the needs of a person or your target. You start from what you have in your system. You do these manipulations like a subtraction, and then you say, okay, what do I have now? I have a bike that people are pedaling. They're not actually going anywhere. So what's the benefit of such a thing? That's the first question you want to ask. Who might enjoy such a system? What would they get out of it? And then you're starting to imagine needs that nobody has ever told you about before. Needs that maybe that have been existing all along. They're latent needs, but nobody's ever published them. It hasn't been identified as a trend. It hasn't been researched the heck out of, and everybody's trying to solve that problem. So you're really uncovering true innovation. You're uncovering a true new need that was always below the surface that people didn't even know to ask for, because they also thought that bikes were for transportation. So you never heard one of your customers say, I would really love a bike that doesn't get me from place to place. So you're not going to hear that from your customers. And, and all of a sudden, you're really finding new needs and you're creating true innovation. So exactly as you mentioned, the process is exactly that. You make an inventory of what you have in your system. You apply one of these tools as templates, like subtraction, and then you try to imagine and visualize what you have, what you've just imagined. And you ask yourself 3 questions then. 1, what value, what benefits, and to whom does this new imaginary or virtual system provide benefits for? Then, if you can identify what those benefits are, and that it really does have benefits for some people, substantially enough that you want to continue the thinking process, you ask, is it feasible? Do I know how to make a bike with no wheels? Do I understand if I want to have a stationary bike that's good for exercise, what type of resistance mechanisms am I going to have to put into it in order to make that feasible, in order to be able to get those benefits that I've already understood through this manipulation, this mental manipulation, this cognitive manipulation. And once you've figured out what the challenges of that are, what are the feasibility challenges, you make the necessary adaptations. And if you've gone through that entire process, now you finally have an idea. We find, you asked one of the biggest mistakes that we see people and organizations making. We find that organizations make a mistake of calling a bike without wheels an idea, because a bike without wheels is an idea. It's a thought. Maybe it's a wish if you really wanted it. But an idea is once you've thought through it of what value is it providing? How will I be able to communicate that value? Who is it valuable for? Do I know even how to get started in making that value and converting that value into something practical? Once you've gone through that exercise, then you have an idea. And this process, this cheat sheet that I just described, we call it SAT, function follows form. Function follows form means that you only identify what the functionality of your new idea or your new thought is once you've created a new form. You've imagined a bike without wheels. Once you've imagined, then you're much better equipped to think about what the value is, rather than trying to solve for a need that the entire industry has been trying to solve for a long time, and think or have the audacity to believe that you'll come out with a concept that's substantially different from what your competitors had been coming up with or are also thinking about at the same time. So this is a really powerful process.
I agree. I accept that. And to speak to what you said, the difference between a dream and a goal is a plan. Otherwise, you're just dreaming. If there's no plan. So just because you thought of a stationary bike, until you've really identified the value of it, like you said, what's the benefit of it? Who wants that benefit? And if it's feasible, there's no plan there. So it's not quite an idea. It's just, like you said, a thought. I thought that was a really important distinction I wanted to reiterate, because otherwise I know so many people, they're just dreamers. Oh, I'm going to have this and I'm going to do that. And they have no plan for how to get there. The plan is the roadmap. Yes, a plan. What is it? A plan means nothing, but planning is everything. And so it's that you got to have the plan, because you got to know where you're going. Otherwise, you get taken left and back and forth. So that's fantastic. What are some of the other big mistakes that you see your clients and other entrepreneurs making?
So another big mistake that we see is that they have a very narrow definition of innovation, or they think very narrowly of where they should be innovative. We find that a lot of organizations and even most people think that innovation is around creating new products or services, which it obviously is. But innovation should also be around thinking about how can I make processes better? How can I make my communications better? How can I really think differently about pretty much anything that I'm doing in the organization? So as I mentioned earlier, in advertising agencies, they have a creative department. And so one of the main challenges when you're working with ad agencies to become more innovative is to convince other people, account managers, strategists, and the like, media buyers, that they're also expected to be creative. They're also expected to be innovative. They think, oh, no, we have a creative department. They're the ones who are creative. We're just doing the regular job. So we find that in most organizations, the operations people, the supply chain people, they say, we're not supposed to be innovative. We're just supposed to be efficient. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that we find in organizations, a very narrow definition of where to plug in innovation, which leads me to what our definition of innovation is. That it's thinking and acting differently to achieve your goals. So anyone who has a goal, and I think everybody should have a goal, both in life and in their organization and in their work, they should be able to, and they should be expected to think differently about what they've been doing until now, to come up with new ideas and new thoughts and act on them. As you mentioned around the plan, they have to be actionable. You have to be able to do something about it. And if you have those three components in place, you've actually thought about something that you're an expert in, that you've been doing the same way for a while. You thought about it in a different way, and you think that you have an idea that can have benefits. If you can convert it to action, if you can act on it, as long as it's contributing to your goal, your personal goal, your organizational goal, that's innovation. So you should have innovation in productivity, you should have innovation in finance, you should have innovation in distribution, you can have innovation in anything, and it's not just product innovation. I think that's one of the main issues that I see in organizations that feel that they need to be innovative and they concentrate too much on creating new products. They put all their eggs in that basket.
100%. I think that's really powerful. You made me think of Jay Abraham. He's a big joint venture guy. And I remember reading one of his books, and he talked about how he was making, I think it was something stupid like $100,000 a month. And it was because this is like 8-track. Back in the 8-track days, when 8-tracks were a thing, there was a warehouse supply store that had a lot of excess inventory just sitting on the shelf of the warehouse waiting for it to sell. And he had friends that had like convenience stores or whatever. And he made a deal, basically, what is that they call that? Is it layaway? No, not layaway. Consignment. He would put up a little stand with all the things there, and they would sell it, and he'd come and collect it, and they would pay him for all the ones that were missing. You know what I mean? And he just eventually ended up having a whole network of this, and all he had to do, and he ended up having his brother drive around in a car, just do an inventory at 100 of these different convenience stores. And it was just the idea of putting two things, and it made me think of OPM, OPC, OPR, other people's money, other people's customers, other people's resources. That one, you can be very creative within what you have, but you can also be creative with the other people. I know people that they've like, what's his name? I forget his name, but he turned his customer support into a profit center. And it's not by pitching and selling everything. It was just training the support staff on the success of products and services that they had. So when they were giving support to a customer, there was an indication that if the customer is really struggling with this in this way, offer them one of our better support packages versus just having them be like a script reader and trained on these 10, here's how you fix these 10 problems. They're actually trained on how to actually recommend other things. And all of a sudden an expense in the company for the customer service actually became a profit center. And this is exactly what you're talking about, just thinking about what you have in different ways. I think that's really powerful. What habits do you feel the most successful companies have that you've seen over the years? Whether they're daily, weekly, quarterly?
Yeah, I think that the most successful companies really embrace the talent that they have in-house. They really want to, they really want their people to be happy, fulfilled, and they want to help them do that by allowing them to utilize their talents to the fullest. So I think that they're much more introspective than external looking, the more successful companies. They're not the ones who are constantly looking externally to bring in mergers, acquisitions, new resources, They're always looking to improve from within and trust their people to be able to outperform what they thought that they were always able to do.
I don't know why, but you made me think of Green Eggs and Ham, the Dr. Seuss book. His product is green eggs and ham. It's green eggs and ham. That's the problem he solves. I've got green eggs and ham. Do you want him with a boat? Do you want him with a goat? Would you eat him with a mouse? Would you eat him in a house?
Try them and you may.
Yeah, and you may. And he kept coming up with unique combinations and reasons why. But at the end of the day, the core problem he was solving was the same. You're hungry. Let's feed you this way. Let's feed you that way. Would you in the rain? Would you on a train? So that's what I'm hearing a little bit. You've got green eggs and ham. All right. What else you got? You're like, oh, I got a rat in the corner. Would you eat him with him? Would you eat him in a house? Would you meet in the rain? Look, I got a hole in the ceiling. Would you eat him in the rain? No? Oh, okay. But it's just finding different ways. I'm just being silly. But it's finding different ways to package what you've got. And I think that's a really powerful.
And it's also helping them do it better. So
Yep.
providing the support, providing them the structures, providing them the infrastructure to allow them to utilize their talents to the fullest. And I think that's one of the real secrets of success of organizations, that they really want their people to be more successful. So they train them, they help them out, they build their processes, they coach them, they mentor them. They really, and that really makes them much more successful.
Because all a company is a group of people solving the pain of another group of people, and they do it via a product or service. So if you have terrible people on your team, you're not. It's this, and I'm gonna try not to go on a soapbox here, but listen, I've been work from home since 2012, so it's been a long time. I get it. I like working from home, but you're not going to build an NBA championship team over Zoom. You're just not.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not. There's just things you can't do. So for me personally, I like the hybrid method where we have mandatory days, like you got to be here these days in office. But and that's coming to and that's just me speaking, but it's talking to what you were just saying there, that you have to invest in the people. You have to spend time with those people. Part of work from home is nice because you're comfortable, but hey, you got to be in this together. You're not in different silos, and magical things can happen.
Yeah, no, and I agree 100%. And that's one of the reasons why we strategically decided at SIT that we were going to keep everyone centrally located. Yeah. It's true that we have work from home days once to twice a week, but we have our 50 people all here in Tel Aviv working together. We have learning sessions. And although we deliver around the world, we're working in 76 countries and all over the place for so long, we're all still together. We work in teams. We mix up the teams so that everybody can benefit from one another, the learnings from the different work that we've done together. And it's really developing the talent of one another and feeding off of each other's different experiences, which helps to grow an organization.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really important. Yoni, what trends are you paying attention to? If you were a crystal ball that you're looking in 5-10 years down the road, what trends are you paying attention to that you think the listeners maybe need to pay attention to as well?
I think that there's a strong orientation. I know that there's a strong orientation towards utilizing technology in new ways, figuring out new ways, especially digital technology. There's a lot of talk about AI and trying to figure out how to use different types of AI in order to improve your processes, in order to improve your business, grow your business. And I think one of the trends is I don't know if it's pitfall or a trend, but one of the important issues that needs to be dealt with right now is understand the balance between how do people interact with the technology and how do you utilize the strong points of each of those, because there's something really sexy about technology and people have been around forever. So sometimes it's a lot less sexy to use your people in new ways or to allow them to do new things. And finding the best way for those two things to interact is really what's going to promote business and help businesses out in the near and far future, rather than putting all your eggs in one of the two baskets, either resisting technology, which some organizations are doing, or fully embracing technology at the expense of employees, which other organizations are doing. I think that it's so many other things in life. It's always finding the balance between what's the new thing, and that you bring it in and you don't resist it, because that's one of the behaviors around innovation. You want to test and understand what this new thing is and how you can use it properly, but don't give up on all the richness that you have already in place. And it's finding the right balance, finding the right combination.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. It depends on the industry as well, but I think that's any other trends that you have on your radar? Or that's the big one for now?
I'm not going to say anything new if I talk about the trends towards sustainability of helping the planet recover and thrive in the future. So obviously that's a really important trend that organizations have to take into account and think about. There's also the trend around how people consume information. So there's
Good one.
of course the trends around communication. How do I reach my targets, and how do I utilize the different new media channels properly and ethically in order to get messages out there, in order to help build my business? We have to pay attention to the way people consume not just our products, but also our messages, also our communications.
Can you give some examples for how that's changed recently? I think I know, but I don't want to assume.
There's been a lot of talk over the last few years about fake news. That's a big issue in communications right now. You mentioned earlier today in our conversation about the fact that somebody communicates one, like the Oprah effect, right?
Right.
A celebrity communicates something and the massive impact it can have just because so many people are hearing that message at the same time in real time. So all those different things that you sometimes think, oh, it's only good things. Oprah's saying great things about the business, so they're going to benefit from that. It can also kill businesses. And you always have to assess how this real-time mass communication can have so many offshoots, positive and negative at the same time.
That's an interesting point of view. I agree with that. I'm a proponent of free speech. I think we can all see mainstream media is dying a very painful, slow death. And I feel like part of it is a disconnect from knowing what people want. But I think I remember when I was living in San Diego, I woke up one morning and I went on Facebook and I saw a woman with a bag over her head on her knees, with her hands tied in her lap. And her husband took the bag off, grabbed her by the hair and cut her head off. This is what I woke up to when I was in San Diego. I'm just like in bed, roll over, going to check my messages. That was in my news feed. And it just ruined my day. Obviously, I just couldn't believe what I had seen. I was so shocked by it. So this is, I think, part of what you're saying, where how do you not try to make the world seem all sunshine and rainbows, but at the same time, not give a platform to psychopaths and not give the control, not give the keys to the control to psychopaths. That's the other, how do we, like, it's like sustainability. I agree. We have to be good stewards of this planet, but I personally feel that we have to beware things being Trojan horsed into that agenda. And we're not going to solve anything on this call, but I'd ask you for some trends to pay attention to. And I think you brought up some really great ones. We have tech. We have to figure out how do we marry people with tech in a way that produces excellence in solving problems, mitigates the risk. And then how do we move into a sustainable future without Trojan horsing, a bunch of other stuff. And the same thing with communication. How do we have that conversation around communication? Because if you stifle speech too much, people, if they can't articulate, I think they did a study and found that a lot of inmates in prison had poor vocabularies and were illiterate. And so the correlation is not causation, but they felt that they couldn't communicate well. So they had to do physical acts of violence and lashing because they couldn't communicate. And I think we're entering a phase where people need to feel that they have and see that they have a voice. So I think that's really important. Yeah, I want to be respectful of your time. I've got a couple pages of notes. I feel like this has been a great call. We've covered a lot of different topics. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that I should have asked you about?
I don't know. I don't know if you've asked me about the organization, something about the organization.
Now, I guess,
that might
might
interest the listeners.
Yeah. Where should they go if they want to learn more? You talked about the subtraction method. Where do people, if they want to learn some of the other innovation tools that you have, they want to learn some of these frameworks and formulas, where do they go to find more info?
Obviously, as an organization, as you mentioned, we're a consulting firm, and what we do is we work with organizations to make them more innovative. We help them use innovation as a tool to accomplish whatever their business goals are. So one of the best sources is to have us train your people, and we can teach you the methodology. It's very systematic. a very structured approach, and we're the best in the world at doing it. And we also teach it in universities. You mentioned that I'm an Ivy League faculty. So yes, we teach systematic inventive thinking also at Columbia University Business School. We teach it at Harvard iLab. We teach it at Wharton. We teach it all over the world in London Business School, etc. That's another source of information for systematic inventive thinking. And those who really want to see the power of it, as an organization, we work with companies and teams on projects to make it apply these subtraction tools, apply the different tools to help them come up with new value, new concepts, new innovations that will lead to better success in the market, and then work with them to help them implement it so they can really build that plan and implement that plan in order to get the value out of what they're looking for. So those are great sources of learning more, either through us or through universities. We've published several books on the topic of systematic inventive thinking. The most recent one is called Inside the Box, which is a description of both the theoretical elements of the methodology of how it was developed at the university and research of innovation, and how it was converted into implementable tools for organizations that are looking to apply innovation effectively, through several case studies of how we've done it with the multinationals and the larger companies in the world. So with some common products that probably everybody's familiar with nowadays, of how they were results of this approach that we applied over the 30 years that we've been around. Those are great resources to find it out. And for those that are interested in really building innovation into the fabric and culture of their organization, and that's exactly what we do.
Perfect. So go to sitsite.com. Can they also contact you? Is that okay? Where do you
Absolutely.
Where should they reach out to you?
It's Yoni, Yoni, at site.com. Yoni at sitsite.com.
Yoni at sitsite.com. Yoni at sitsite.com. You can also look him up on LinkedIn. YONISTERN. Yoni, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, knowing you have your own family, your own followers, your own direct reports, your own students to look out for. Thank you for coming and sharing with me and mine so we can all innovate a little bit better.
Thank you, Daryl. It was a pleasure being here.